everywhere else. The others would not interfere if only they knew about their own needs and interests. Rudyard Kipling in 1899 wrote the famous lines expressing this idea most clearly. Take up the white man's burden, send forth the best ye breed. Go bind your sons to exile, to serve your captives' need, to serve their need. They do not know their need for themselves. On the other hand, the idea of an integrative centrism can be identified in classical texts from Chinese philosophy. Well known in Taoist tradition is the principle of Wu Wei, of not interference, or taking no action. But the term is common in Confucianism and legalism as well. When Mencius, the Confucianist, was asked by the king about the way to gain the empire, his answer has been in the same direction. The ruler does not have to activate troops and to organize tax paying, but only to look that justice is done to everyone. I quote from Mencius' answer to the question of how to convince the whole world about one's own way. Just do justice to your people, and then the people would flock to him who does that, as water flows downwards with a rush, which no one can repress. The non-interference principle is very actual in today's literature, in today's scholarship in China, for example. There is, I can only quote that in German because there is no English translation from an article from 1997, where one of the leading politicians and also sociologists of China says, als Chinese bin ich prinzipiell davon überzeugt, dass von der chinesischen Philosophie als Kern unserer Kultur ein Ausweg nicht nur aus der kulturellen Krise des gegenwärtigen China, sondern auch aus der globalen kulturellen Krise führt. The Chinese tradition gives the means to overcome the cultural crisis of globalization for all the world. There is no need for dialogues or something of that kind. In formal sense, both these types of expansive and of integrative centrism are presupposing that truth in theoretical matters and validity in practical norms has definitely been established. With respect to alien ways of thinking, a typical hypothesis of such types may be that those others can be seen as preliminary stages of one's own. Therefore, they will be tolerable insofar as they do not hinder general development and do not resist to reasonable acculturation. Certainly, the criteria for reasonableness and generality will be defined without the participation of those not belonging to the center. There may be practical reasons for tolerance under such premises, but such reasons will only hold under conditions and in a limited area. The limits will be decided upon by those who tolerate and not by the tolerated. Now the case seems to be different with multiple or separative centrism, and it certainly is different with respect to mere tolerance. Their most different ways of thinking and acting can be seen as being cultural universes, coexisting without any pretension to absolute truth or validity in any field. Rarely this idea has been expressed in such crude terms as did the German philosopher Oswald Spengler around World War I. He said, "For other men there are other truths. To the thinker, all of them are valid or no one." In German, he is using the word gleichgültig. But you know, when you don't separate these German these two German words, gleichgültig, then it is gleichgültig. And that is what Spengler means, ultimately. In philosophy, some approximation to such a position can be found when it is held that there are fundamental differences between East and West, and that never the twain shall meet. If we are concerned with more than these two, the maxim might be to let 100 ethno-philosophies be flowering. All of them might argue by different standards of logic. They might conceptualize their world by concepts so different from others that they could not be translated in somebody else's concepts, even if they may have not in common any aesthetic or moral values. They will not try to persuade others out of the consciousness that there is nothing arguable. In such a world, people certainly will tolerate each other. There would be no argument whatsoever for intolerance. On the other hand, it is hard to imagine reasons why people in such a world should seriously discuss with each other. With other words, philosophy in traditional understanding, as it has been practiced in Greece and the Occident, as well as in India, China, Korea, Japan, the Arab world since Kalam and the Mutazilit, in African societies, and maybe in Aztec Mexico, philosophy in this understanding will not continue under such skeptical premises. However, there is no risk that such cultural skepticism ever gains serious acceptance outside academic circles and trendy books. In fact, human beings will continue to reason for their convictions and will try to convince each other. Therefore, cultivation of something like the tentative type of centrism, as it is intended in what I call the model of polylogs, is a primary task in philosophy. And the basis for that is the capacity of human beings to change perspectives, which is very astonishing. It is not self-evident that this capacity even exists. Now I come to my second sheet here. Starting from these distinctions of centrism, one could imagine two extreme, non-real existing types of discussions or of influencing. The first one would be a strictly monological type, and the second a strictly polylogical one. And no one from those, not one of those types does depict reality. It is just logically thinkable. I think there are arguments for the one and for the other, and but it is not depicting reality. Imagine that there is a question in human rights discussion and that there are four parties holding different views. Not only two parties, but four.
If we start with the exclusive type of centrism, then we will give A an absolute priority. A will be right, and there will be no alternative, so that every alternative will be influenced and eliminated from A, from the position of A. This is a monologue.
A monologue to different partners. And this monologic understanding has the following prepositions. There are no influences whatsoever coming from the others. There is only one direction in that model. Second, there is indifference and ignoring between all others. B, C, and D, there is no connection. They don't, there's, in philosophy we have to say that there is no self-self dialogue, for example. And third, the influence of A equally works in any direction. There's no differentiation in the interest in such a strictly monological understanding. This is logically possible, but not real. There is always something coming back from the others. So the sketch does not give real world. Again, it is one possibility. On the other side of from all the possibilities in this understanding is a total encounter between all of those, and say that they are four or even more, it will be even more irreal or even more impossible to imagine that. This would be a polylog, a polylogical discourse. All of the parties are discussing with each other. None of them, they are equal but different. Equal on the level of understanding, equal in that sense that all of them know that the others have developed concepts, categories, methods of thinking, of arguing at the same level as one has it in one's own tradition. There are influences from all sides to every tradition. Everyone is interested in every other. All of the influences are working with equal intensity. This again is not depicting reality, but it is important to ask whether such an idea can serve as a regulative idea for practicing philosophy on a global scale. It seems preferable from logical reasons, since there will be no presupposition of absolute rightness as long as there are different views. The presupposition here merely is that activating human reason in as many directions as possible will be effective. This then will be a continuation of what the European tradition called the Project of Enlightenment, but with different means. The European, the Occidental Project of Enlightenment relied on a unique method of science, finding out the unique method to answer all questions. And this is a different proposal. A polylogical process would do the same, but by creating the activity of traditions, the activity of as many traditions as there are, and to bring them together to create new understandings in the questions discussed. Thank you very much.
I think we can work well together because mediators try that this can keep going on.
Yeah. Polylog is not the word in the singular. It is, you cannot say that there is a final solution. It is always describing or or trying to activate this mutual argumentation on equal level.
Are there any questions, comments?
Well, I'm a little bit afraid you're teaching us a kind of centrism, like Polylog would be a good solution in contrast to conflicts. Yeah? I think our ethic systems or moralic systems or traditions and so they have a kind of self and they have a kind of definition. And definition actually means finesse, the border, the line. Don't cross over. And that is an inherenter Bestandteil,
Inherent.
yeah, of every philosophy or every ethic system. So what we want, Polylog, is actually something which does not convene,
Yeah.
together to self-understanding of a moralic or ethic system. And that is a paradox.
You think so?
I'm afraid.
Oh, you're afraid. Well, when I said that with respect to that tentative centrism, which I prefer, of course, I said that there may be even the necessity to hold that one's values are absolutely right, or one's insights, evidences are absolutely true. This even may be a preposition to understand what the other means. A colleague of mine, Professor Malm in Munich, gave an example of that, which is an example which I like. I can say it first in German, perhaps. Wenn jemand sagt, meine Mutter ist die Beste, my mother is the best, yeah? And then change mother for nation, for language, for religion, for what you want. My mother is the best. And this is not only a saying, it most times is, but maybe one is convinced that my mother is the best, my nation is the best, and my culture, and so on. Okay, and now you're encountering somebody else who says linguistically the same utterance. His or her mother is the best, but the best is a singular. There can be only one best culture, nature, language, what else? Mother. Now, Mari says, I have to be convinced that my mother is the best in order to understand what he or she means who says his or her mother is the best. Otherwise, I will not understand really what he or she means. And this is he's distinguishing then between his proposal is to distinguish between absoluteness internally and absoluteness externally, to universally. Now this absoluteness internally, the conviction of one's own tradition or insights, is not only the presupposition to understand, but also the starting points of these polylogs, of any of them. And this is a never-ending and activating, as I said, an activating process. So I do not see really your consequence of there here being, was sagen Sie, ein Widerspruch.
Just an idea, if you expand the sentence from my mother is the best to my mother is the best for me, then probably you will become separative.
Separate, yeah. If you say, well, for me, if you always say, well, this is true for me, this is valid for me, and so on, then you cannot avoid relativism, and you come into separatism. Separatism has two very very heavy consequences. One is that you really have to hold the frontiers, the lines, the finesse, as you said. You really have to separate, and this means you have to define who are within and who are outside. And both cases, it's like in a war with fortresses. With fortresses, you always have these problems to give a definition for those are outside and for those are inside. So, okay, if you say for me and you mean that, and for him and her, then you just create separate words, separate universes, and no mutual interest, no living together.
You have my mother is the best as your necessary perspective, as a tool in order to understand your vis-a-vis. Then you have a pre-programmed conflict of interest.
Why?
Well, I separate myself from the vis-a-vis. In order to understand him, I need that crutch of separation.
Mm-hmm.
And how can you start this Polylog?
Well, again, I tried with a different idea, not with this example now. It has been rightly. It has been said that that there has more to be done in philosophy than just to compare. Comparative philosophy was an idea coming from India, from Calcutta, at the beginning of the 20th century. And this was an idea, and is an idea, that different philosophical worldviews and systems are comparable and worth to compare. And so you first have to select the worthy ones and have to exclude what is not so interesting or so okay. And then to compare, only to compare, just to look what do they say, what are they thinking, how are they arguing. The highest result, the best result you can come to is that you really understand what they are doing, okay? And then this will be the final point. And then you can say, well, I understand that the Indian tradition, for example, have nourished the idea that there are 6 sources of knowledge, while the Western tradition has only 2 sources of knowledge. And what do you do with that result? Usually, the Occidental interpreters said, well, these 6 sources of knowledge must be reduced to the 2 real one, to the senses and the ratio. This is the senses and the ratio in our tradition. And it's just an Indian fantasy, maybe. While the Indian would say, well, the Western tradition is very very poor in that respect, very undifferentiated, and the same has been said by Japanese and so on. Now, by pure comparing, you do not get to the point of what can the one learn from the other. Can there be an insight coming from a real different tradition? And the polylogical model allows to look for such enrichment, for such new insights, not only to the comparison.
Yeah, I have just a question. I'm interested to know what is the difference between centrism expansive and conspiration.
And
conspiration. What is the difference between this centrism approach and the conspiration?
Maybe I would say that conspiration may be a means, one of the strategies of an expansive centrism, but I wouldn't equate that. It must not always be conspirative or conspiration. Yeah. Missionarism is not necessarily a conspiration, is it? Or civilizing, colonizing the world. Yeah.
I'd like to make an additional drawing.
Yeah, sure. Feel free.
A drawing of a lady, not of a philosopher. But I want the comment of the philosopher.
Yeah.
I try to connect your ideas of centrism with the kind of dialogue or polylog I see in mediation.
Yeah.
I work in mediation process in the public sector, so there are usually many different groups of interests. So let's say we have 4 different groups of interests. Could be, I don't know, for example, economic, environmental, social and local or whatever, and everybody comes with his own centrism, with his own concept, with his understanding of a certain situation, of a certain project, and so on. And then what does happen in mediation, I think, not always in perfect manner, but I think it does happen. Everybody, if the people are willing to contribute in a mediative sense, they contribute their share of understanding.
Mm-hmm.
So what can happen is that after a certain period of conversation, I don't know if it would be a dialogue or a polylog, or I have rather feeling they put something together and a kind of new picture understands, and then it is the point where the people say, I see something else which I didn't see before. Can you bring that together with, does this fit into this concept? Is this actually possible to happen, that the group starts or creates a new common understanding? Because we think this is necessary to get onto solutions where all the parties are involved.
I'm very glad for that. Very grateful for that. But this surrounding is very important in your sketch this year. This is extremely important because in the first step of your sketch, one could say, well, this is only that the different positions now are somewhere else in the mind of the mediator. They are coming together, but they are still separated here. And you did first sketch like that. You did sketch it somewhere else, but separate. But this is exactly what I'm looking for.
But then it's necessary that every participant in the group gets this new understanding, and not only some or the mediator. Now I see.
And then there may be the situation, and this is what really happens. And then they say, well, okay, that is what we came together. That is what we produced now. And we have a new understanding. But my view has to be processed more, or has to be priority. And then the whole thing starts from the beginning, or almost from the beginning.
Before we take the next question, is Rosawa already here? So we are free to take it.
So, thank you for having the opportunity once more. That's actually what I'm thinking about. You know, when I am emperor from A, the island A,
Yes.
and I have the opportunity, I can give the opportunity or not to my son, to my peasant, to my anyone in my court, in a discussion with B, C, D, I have fear and danger. It will change my peasant.
Yeah.
Because if I say, you stay with me in A, we are the best, maybe he will leave me, no? Because it's ultra.
Yeah.
but maybe he will stay. If I let him go and come back, he will be A, but knowing B and C and D, and it changes.
Yeah, that's.
And so this is the question, how can we, this categorischen Imperativ, you tell us, how can we make it dynamic so
I
that
can
it
give
works?
only theoretical reasons, but not only. But first, I would give a theoretical reason. The two first mentioned types, the expansive and the integrative, have to presuppose something which they cannot reason for. That is, that any alternative is wrong. They even do not prove. They cannot prove the alternatives in a real serious way. The most they can do is to compare comparative, yes, and maybe to compare with the understanding to better influence them, for example, as has been said about Indology, for example, with some reason. So they do presuppose a very strong thesis that there is no alternative. If there are different forms, then all the others must be wrong. This is just too strong an idea, not provable.
There are several questions when Frau Sauer is entering, then we have to stop. But now we can skip Schubert.
My question for the last created version of it is, in that situation, if the four parties come in together, I'm presuming there will be at least one or two who are considered more superior or stronger, then is the outcome of the common experience or the common shared view going to presuppose at the end that they are actually now equal parties? Does that change, or the power dynamics still remain?
I said that this is not depicting reality. In the pure thought, as a pure model, the Polylog presupposes that all of them are equal, that there are no social hierarchies, there is no center and periphery, and so on and so forth, which never is the case. They have different languages, and there is not one language more evaluated than another. And this is never. So the whole that can be done or activated is to go in that direction, to activate processes, and then what there can describe those processes, in that direction.